Speed tiers. This is a term that's thrown around a lot in the competitive community. I think most of us have a kind of good idea what it is, but in my experience, it's never something taught, but just slowly learned and attuned to after a lot of trial and error and a lot of eating bad thunderbolts and bad Draco meteors. And that's bullshit. I went for weeks getting smoked by shell smash cloisters before I realized that I could outspeed them with my Scarf Dragapult. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I'm here to save you that trouble by giving you a crash course in Sword and Shield overused speed tiers. First things first, I need to explain what a speed tier actually is. So for those new to the term, speed tiers are essentially a few benchmarks of speed that a group of important Pokemon in a metagame hover around. If you can learn these speed tiers and sort of mentally place all the different Pokemon you come across into these tiers accordingly, you'll be surprised by how much better you get and how quickly. More specifically, the big thing that I always harp about, knowing how Pokemon match up versus each other, becomes a lot easier to juggle in your head once you understand these speed tiers backwards and forwards. One of the best examples I can think of to explain this concept is the base 100 speed tier from Pokemon X and Y Overused. In that tier of play, there are a ton of important and relevant Pokemon who sit very neatly around the base 100 speed tier. This makes someone like Hydreigon, who is just under base 100 speed, pretty terrible in X and Y, despite the huge buffs to Dark type that happened that generation. And someone like Garchomp, who has a slight edge with 102 base speed, amazing in that meta. If that 4-point difference wasn't a good example of how important speed tiers can be, I can't think of one. Because if that 4-point difference wasn't so perfectly centered on that speed tier, but just kind of anywhere else, it probably wouldn't create such a big difference in viability. But because it's exactly based on that important base 100 speed tier, it's a huge gap between the two. This is why max EV investment is so important. If you think about the benefits of making, let's say, your Choice Specs Latios modest instead of timid, lowering its speed, that's a huge boost in power, first of all. It can totally be worth it. You know, all of a sudden you can one-hit KO even a max Spadeft Rotom, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's very powerful. By the same token, you're now getting outsped by that exact same Hydreigon I mentioned earlier, who has nearly 15 less base speed than you do. And this is one thing to consider with your speedy attacking Pokemon, where, you know, if we're being honest, most of the time people choose to max out their speed so they know exactly who they do and don't outspeed. But this decision becomes something else entirely with a defensive Pokemon like Tentacruel. So Tentacruel also sits on that crucial base 100 speed tier. It can probably stand to gain quite a bit from keeping that speed up. You know, a fast spinner can be really useful, but you know, hell, so are full defensive EVs. So which do you choose? And so yeah, like I said, this is one thing around the base 100 speed tier, where like I said, most Pokemon are running max speed for the most part, but the toss-up between other stats becomes very real around a slower speed tier like 60, for example. There's a lot of Pokemon who would benefit from other EV investment. Now, I try to keep these videos as broad as possible so it can apply to as many different metas and possible generations as possible, you know, fundamental skills that can kind of go anywhere. For this one, I'm just going to be talking about the current Sword and Shield meta as of March 20 to 12 of quarantine, you know, whatever you wanted to call it. And of course, you know, these features are important for any other Pokemon meta. Don't get me wrong, there's still lots to learn from what I'm about to say if you don't play Sword and Shield OU. But I'm just going to tackle this explanation by demonstrating the main 3 speed tiers of this generation and how they shape the meta and your team building and even your play in the match. So, in my opinion, the main 3 speed tiers in Sword and Shield Overused can be broken down to 3 main tiers: base 60 speed, base 80 speed, and base 142 speed. So first things first, the Pokemon with base 60 speed. In the overused meta, this usually makes up some pretty bulky Pokemon like Fable or Aegislash, Grimmsnarl, Sylveon, Tyranitar, Incineroar, Primarina. There's also others in the vicinity of 60 like Crawdaunt or Sirfetch'd, Corviknight, Pelipper, or even Centiskorch. And these guys have an interesting choice because they all have very good defensive stats and aren't outspeeding a whole lot of Pokemon. So they have a lot to gain from investing some defensive stats. So, you know, they can take a hit and then attack afterwards or do whatever they want to do. But on the other hand, they can get the edge on each other by investing in their own speed. So for example, one of the most important jobs an Aegislash can have is shutting down a Clefable offensively. But that's going to be a lot harder if you're stuck in a 50-50 speed type every time you're matched up against each other. Investing in that extra speed at this tier can be pretty useful as a result, because not only does it give you an edge on everyone else in the 60s, but it can even let you catch up to the base 80 speed tier. That's right, another important aspect of speed tiers isn't just how you match up with others in your own tier, but understanding the conditions that can allow you to punch up to those higher tiers. So the base 80 is filled with generally fast but still bulky and hard-hitting Pokemon like Chandelure, Mamoswine, Togekiss, Venusaur, Gyarados, Melodic, technically even Mandibuzz. They can actually be outsped by the base 60 speed tier if they don't invest in their speed at all and they completely max out theirs. I mean, hell, to bring back that Tentacle example from earlier, if he doesn't put a drop of investment into his very elite base 100 speed, he can still get smoked by a base 60 Magnezone before he knows it. So the investment matters more than you even think at the time. But yeah, sorry, to get back to the 80 speed tier, it's a bit more of a wider range because crawling up on the 80s, we also see Duraludon and Komodo at 85, the Rotoms at 86, and of course Excadrill at 88. I always find this to be an interesting speed tier because oftentimes they're fast enough so that bulky Pokemon can't swap in, or they'll be outsped and finished off the next turn. And the faster Pokemon are too frail to safely swap in at all before they'll just be killed in one hit. And there's also, of course, a lot of really important Pokemon below this in the 70s, like Bisharp, Base Cloyster, Seismitoad, Toxtricity, Necrozma, Diggersby, the Dracos, both Volt and Vish. The reason why I differentiate so harshly between the 70s and the 80s, even something like 78, is because once you reach base 79 speed, to be perfectly exact, is that Pokemon at this speed tier are one stage away from the next most important speed tier, which is 142. And if that number doesn't immediately fill you with like a sense of foreboding, you have not been playing much Sword and Shield, because that is a good old Dragapult's base speed. Dragapult is blessed with a speed tier unseen in Pokemon, with the exception of gimmicky Pokemon and Ubers. And he's, as a result, quickly established himself as the king of overuse as a result. Recently, he was joined in his solitary speed tier by Zeraora, who has also quickly climbed the usage stats as a great counter to Dragapult, because he outspeeds him by literally 1 point. And if that isn't petty, I don't know what is. But as I alluded to earlier, these Pokemon can still be outsped very narrowly by that base 80 Pokemon if they boost their speed by 1 tier. So that means if it's a Choice Scarf, or a single Rapid Spin, or a Dragon Dance, what have you. This is why, in my opinion, the most effective Scarfers in Overused need to have at least 80 speed, so they can beat any other unboosted Mon. I, for one, am convinced that if Dracovish had hit the speed tier, he would be ban-worthy like very quickly, because nothing could have been able to beat him offensively. And I know I said it was just 3 main tiers, but there are a lot of relevant Pokemon we found between 80 and 143, of course. The base 95 is kind of emerging as a mini speed tier with Obstagoon, Kyurem, Hydreigon, Mimikyu, Darmanitan, Haxorus, and Arcanine all being in that general area. And going up from there, you got the base 100s, you have the newly arrived 108s, and then there's these speedsters, until you reach Dragapult, of course. So yes, of course, there's much more gradation to it than what I've described, but in my opinion, the best way to make use of the speed tiers is sort of like a mental ranking of Pokemon. Once you have this in mind, you can then quickly assign a general speed to enemy Pokemon to see how they match up versus your own. So to give an example, I'm going to go a bit into the sticks with this one, but let's put it this way. You're against a Cloyster and you watch him Shell Smash against you and think, okay, Cloyster does not have base 80 speed, he has 70. So he needs not 1 speed boost to outspeed my Dragapult, he needs 2 speed boosts, which Shell Smash grants. So if my Dragapult is Scarfed, which is again another speed boost, which it is, then he needs 3 boosts to speed to beat me, which the Shell Smash does not grant. So just by doing that sort of mental calculus in my head very quickly, I can realize, okay, my Dragapult is still faster. Or another example, you can think, okay, that Aegislash was definitely slower than my Komodo, who I put 0 speed into. That means the Aegislash is not running max speed. Now, all of a sudden, I really like the matchup with my faster Life Orb Clefable. This kind of thinking can kind of reprogram your brain to rank all Pokemon neatly into different categories. And once you get better, the speed tiers that you assign to these Pokemon will grow and become more nuanced. Like, oh, that Keldeo got its speed lowered by sticky webs. Now my Tyranitar can outspeed it and finish it off. Now, of course, you can figure all this out in-game without speed tiers by looking up all the Pokemon you're playing against, or by constantly checking the max speed of enemy Pokemon on Showdown's really handy speed range provider. But the more of this you can do in your head, the faster you'll get, and the more time you can dedicate to formulating a game plan. It's kind of like, sure, as a kid, you can solve a multiplication problem by counting them up in your head manually, or using a calculator or whatever, but if you memorize it so it's automatic, that becomes an important foundation for your knowledge going forward. This is really the same thing, and if you already know all this information about the OU meta, that's great. Like I've said, this is more of a method for learning than improving an already completed understanding. But that doesn't mean you can't apply it to other metagames that you might end up trying. So yeah, I just dropped a lot of info in your head there, but keep those 3 speed tiers in mind when you play going forward. Even if it only speeds up your playing process by 1 extra beat, I'll be happy. And also, like I said, important speed tiers exist around every generation and every tier of play. So if you're trying to play something other than Sword and Shield OU, try to identify the big important speed tiers that the most influential Pokemon hover around there. Hell, the tiers I listed here might be irrelevant by the time the DLC comes around in just a couple months. Regardless, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, maybe consider throwing me a subscription. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you for watching. Take it easy.